Hi everybody and welcome. I have a yoga for scoliosis practice for you today. This practice is ideal for those of you who know what your curve pattern is. So curve or convex side versus your concave side. You also need to know if that curve is in your thoracic spine, upper body, or if it's in the lumbar spine, lower body. Or some of us, myself included, might have more of a C curve in the middle here, a thoracolumbar curve. So if you don't know your curve pattern, today's practice is not going to be the best for you. Also, if you have a scoliosis fusion, today's practice won't be the best for you. My name's Mandy, if you're new around here. I have been a yoga teacher since 2003. I have severe scoliosis myself. And I've been practicing and specializing in helping people who have scoliosis and back pain for about the last 8 or 9 years. Today's practice is going to have a lot of hip work involved in it. So as always, listen to your body, back away or modify as you need to. Take a break when you want to, and we'll get started. So having some props handy is going to be ideal. I have my washcloths to pad my concavity. If you have more than one concavity, you'll pad both. I have 2 blocks handy today, and then a blanket, which you may or may not end up using. So let's go ahead and find our way down onto our backs. We're going to start in a reclined bound angle. The safest way to transition to our back is actually through the side. So I'm going to kind of slide down onto my side here and then roll onto my back. And if you're new around here, this might be the first time you've gone through this little check-in. So we'll just start with our feet on the floor and our knees bent, and then check in to all the places that are currently touching the ground. So let's start with our head, and it's possible that your head might feel like it's dropping back right now. Your chin might feel lifted, and your gaze might feel like it's a little back behind you. So if that's the case, that's a good indication that you could use a little head support. So you might choose to bring a blanket in under your head, but we never prop our head up higher than it needs to be. So we're always looking for a neutral spine here, where we would have a straight line from our ear to our shoulder to our hip. So do your own check-in, decide if you need to have that blanket support or not. And then from there, you're going to check in with everything from your shoulders to your hips. And just kind of notice which parts of your body feel like they're touching the ground a little more than others. So if you have a scoliosis curve, or perhaps more than one curve, the curved side generally touches the floor more than the concave side. Let's see if you can feel into that. And then as we start our practice today, we are going to begin by bringing some padding into our concavities. So I only have one concavity. I'll bring some padding into that. And when we bring our padding into our concavities, we're not trying to build the space higher up towards the sky. We're just giving those muscles some support and some feedback. So quite often the concave side of our body doesn't touch back against something. It doesn't touch the chair, it doesn't touch the floor, so it doesn't get that same level of touch feedback as our curved side does. You might also find your shoulders need some padding. If your shoulders are high up from the ground, you could bring some washcloths in under the shoulders. Same thing if your low back is way away from the ground the whole way across, you might bring some padding in across the whole low back. So just take a few moments, really tune in, close your eyes if that's helpful, and notice what needs to be supported. So when we start our practice and we start with rest, we're trying to calm down our nervous system, so support is the name of the game. All right, and then when you're well supported, we're going to let our knees drop away from each other and let the soles of the feet find each other. And again, we're looking for support. So we're not looking for a great big giant stretch here to start our practice. Depending on your mobility and what you have happening in your hips, you might find that this is a big stretch. So if that's the case, you could prop your legs up with your blocks. The closer in towards the hips that you bring your blocks, the more support you'll have. I'll take a moment, get yourself arranged there, and then when you're ready, just close your eyes and start to let yourself land here. It might be helpful to take a couple of really full, big breaths. You can always sigh or yawn on your exhale. Let go of anything that's already happened today. Let go of anything that's yet to come later today, and just let yourself arrive in this present moment, right here, right now. And then use your breath as a way of keeping yourself present. Well, just start by noticing how your breath wants to arrive today. You might tune in and notice the pace of your breath. Is it fast? Is it slow? You might notice the depth of your breath. Does it feel like you're breathing into your belly or more your upper chest or somewhere in between? And maybe notice any textures that are present. Does your breath feel smooth and even? Does it feel bumpy or jagged? And then little by little, see if you can start letting your breath expand. Allowing the breath to take a little bit more time, a little bit more space. Allow the breath to become a little more smooth. And then really tune into the movement that happens in your body as you breathe. And see how large you can let that movement be as the breath continues to expand. So we can think about our lungs as if they're a balloon filling with air. Letting the balloon expand in 360 degrees as you breathe in. And then as you breathe out, allow yourself to soften and relax. And just let the floor and the supports hold your body. Breathing in, nice full big breath. Letting the whole torso respond to that inhale. And then breathing out, allow yourself to soften. And go ahead and do just a few more of those breaths. Full and complete, equal expansion of the lungs in all directions. Softening through your body as you exhale. Letting the body be held. And then we're going to draw our attention into our spine and remember our curve pattern. You may have more than one curve, which means you also have more than one concavity. So our concavities are the areas that are a little more compressed. So this next time that you breathe in, choose a concavity to work with. Maybe it's the primary concavity, or maybe it's the thoracic concavity. That's sometimes a little easier to work with when we're working with breath. So choose your concavity and then breathe into that space. Like you could breathe a little more into one side of your body. And then go ahead and soften as you exhale. We're going to kind of add to this. So again, Same concavity in mind, breathing into the concavity, breathing that space out to the side and down towards the floor. And then this time, as you exhale, imagine you could draw the corresponding curve towards the midline and up and away from the floor. And we'll try that a few times. Breathing into the concavity, out to the side, and down towards the floor. And then breathing out from the curve, drawing it to the midline, and up and away from the floor. Giving that another few more breaths. Creating space and expansion in the concave area. And again, this might be easier to feel if it's in the thoracic. But if you only have a lumbar curve, then try to work with that anyway. Maybe one or two more breaths here. And then you can allow that way of breathing to fade away. Let your breath find its own natural pace here again. And let your awareness shift to sensations in your body. Just do a gentle check-in here and notice each and every body part that's drawing your awareness right away. Maybe there are sensations that are calling your attention. And then have a moment and check in with all the quieter spots and see if you can just allow yourself to notice how your body is arriving without creating any stories around that today. So we don't need to judge how our body's showing up. We don't need to beat ourselves up for whatever happened earlier today or yesterday. Just notice how you're arriving today, only so you know how you can support yourself throughout your practice. And then we're going to start to bring a little movement into our body. So if your legs are still happy here, you're welcome to stay in this position with the legs. If your hips have had enough of this, go ahead and just stand your knees back up towards the sky so that the feet are on the floor and the knees are pointing upward. We're going to bring a little movement into our arms here to start. So let's let our hands be down by our hips, and then we're going to take our arms up towards the sky and back towards the floor any amount. And then bring your arms back towards the sky and down by the sides. And we're just going to give that a go a few times. So as you get this movement coming into the arms, we're going to just check in and notice whatever there is to notice. So let's start by bringing our attention into the rib cage as we move our arms. And notice if your low ribs like to pop away from the floor as the arms come overhead. And if you're finding that to be the case, then you have two options. See if you can find a little more core engagement to keep the ribs in place while the arms move. Or maybe it's an and. Let your hands maybe not go so far. So go only as far as you can through the arms while keeping the ribs down. So you can experiment with that for another few breaths here, keeping the low ribs down, and then just noticing the range of motion that you have in the shoulder joint. And then the next time that you bring your arms down by the sides, let's go ahead and stay there. If it feels okay for you, stretch the left leg out onto the floor. And then we're going to keep our right knee bent, and we're going to pick our foot up off the ground and bring some circles into the hip. So sometimes I imagine there's a paintbrush taped to my kneecap and I'm painting circles on the ceiling, but the movement is originating from the hip joint. Okay, and then while we're moving circles here, we're going to take our attention into our pelvis And notice if your pelvis is also moving. And if it is, again, see if you can find a little bit of core engagement to keep the pelvis steady and limit the movement to just your leg. Okay, so I'm going to exaggerate this for a moment. So sometimes people will let their circles get really big and their pelvis kind of rocks and rolls all over the place. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but depending on your curve pattern and depending on what else might be happening in your spine, sometimes that twisting motion in the low back doesn't feel good for people and it might exaggerate some pain. So see if for today at least, you can keep the low back and the pelvis super steady and let the circles just be in the hip. And we've been doing this for a while now, so we're gonna go ahead and stop, but you can have a chance to practice on the other side. So keeping the same leg involved here, we're gonna take our hands around the back of our thigh and then stretch your leg towards the ceiling any amount. And then bend the knee again and stretch the leg towards the ceiling any amount. And we're just gonna come back and forth again. So depending on how tight your hamstrings are, you might not be able to straighten your leg the whole way, and that's perfectly okay. If you need to keep a knee bend, keep a knee bend. And then pause for a moment, or keep the movement going, but pause your awareness for a moment. And drop your attention into your low back. And just notice if when you stretch your leg up, if you try to push things too much, does your low back squish to the floor? And if that's the case, then lessen the movement in your leg. Keep the low back nice and neutral. All right, this next time we stretch our leg up, we're gonna stay there. Again, keep a knee bend if you need it. We're gonna bring some circles into our ankle joint. See if you can be nice and slow and deliberate with your circles. Sometimes if we move quickly, we just kind of go right past the hard parts, the places that actually really need our attention. Good, always settle back in with your breath. Fantastic. We're gonna take our hands away. We're gonna bend our knee and let the foot land on the ground. And then we're gonna drop just the right knee open this time. So you might find that your leg is a little more free now since we did our reclined bound angle. Maybe you can be here comfortably and the pelvis can be steady. However, if this feels like too big of a stretch, or if you found that your whole pelvis just plopped off to the side, go ahead and grab a block again. Props are our friends. Prop up the leg if you need it. So our pelvis is neutral and the low back is still neutral. I'm gonna bring our arms up towards the sky again and back towards the floor behind you any amount. So take what you learned earlier about your shoulder movement and your mobility and bring it into play here as well. So if the hands can't touch down, that's okay. Go where you can go with keeping the back uninvolved. Take a big breath. This is a reclined tree pose. And then let's go ahead and let our arms come back down by our sides. I'm gonna rearrange to our other side here. So stretch the right leg out if that feels all right. You could keep the knee bent if you needed to, foot on the floor. And then we're gonna bring our left knee in and come back to our hip circles. Okay, so here's another chance to kind of dial this in again. Tune back into the pelvis and the low back and notice how much they're getting involved. And notice if you can let this movement just be at the hips. So the low back isn't squished into the floor. The hips aren't rocking and rolling. Good, pelvis isn't rocking and rolling, I should say. So just notice how the hip is moving here today. Staying in whatever range of motion feels safe and comfortable. And then we'll go ahead and find our way back to center. Hold on to the back of the thigh. We're going to stretch our leg up any amount and then bend the knee back down. Quite often with scoliosis, our two sides are not the same. And that goes for hamstrings as well, because really scoliosis is a whole body situation. So you might find here that this hamstring feels a little more free, or maybe it feels a little more tight, or maybe there isn't a difference for you. That's also completely valid. This next time we bring our leg up overhead, we're going to go ahead and pause there. Keep that knee bend if you need it. And we're going to bring some circles down into our ankle. Again, super deliberate, mindful movement here. Notice if your circle is truly a circle, or maybe it's shaped more like a letter D or an oval or something else. Really giving some attention to all parts of this movement here, all of the range of your motion. And then we're going to go ahead and gently find our knee bend. Take the hands away, let the foot land. We're going to find our reclined tree pose again. So the left knee is going to drop open to the left. Use your block support again if you need it. Check in and make sure your pelvis is still neutral. So our frontal hip points, the sticky outie bones in the front of your pelvis here, should still both be pointing straight up towards the sky. And then we'll bring our arm reach in, taking the arms back any amount. Keep your right leg nice and active, like you're standing on the sole of that foot. And then settle in with your breath. And while we're here, we'll think about lengthening our spine with each breath in, elongating, lengthening the spine, keeping that length as you exhale. And then let's go ahead and release our hands back down to the floor. We'll stand our knee back up towards the sky. Let the right knee come in to meet it. And then we're going to find our way over to hands and knees. So go ahead and draw one arm up overhead. Roll to that side. Use your arms for support to press your way up. And then we'll find our way over onto our knees here. So we're going to come into a puppy pose next. This is another way of elongating our spine. So let's go ahead and start on hands and knees. And we're just going to start to rock our hips forward and back. And then while you're doing this, check in with the low back. So at some point here, your back is going to want to round. And we're going to try not to let that happen. So we're going to limit our range of movement to a place where we can keep the low back nice and steady and neutral. And then this next time we shift back, we're going to find that place where we can come to with a neutral spine and pause. And then walk your hands as far forward as you can. So if this feels like too much for your shoulders, you might try bringing your hands up onto your blocks. I can show what that looks like. What we're going for here is length through our spine. So sometimes having your hands up on blocks, even if it feels okay for the shoulders to be down, sometimes that actually just lets us feel like we can lengthen a little more. So once we're here, we're going to think about suctioning our hands in place and then really reaching the sit bones back away from the fingers. Settle in with your breath again. Okay, we're going to tune in to our curve pattern here. If you have a thoracic curve or a thoracolumbar curve, we're going to walk our hands towards our curve side. So my uppermost curve is towards the left. So I'm walking my hands towards the left side, and I'm elongating the concavity on my right side. We'll pause here for a few breaths, breathing into the concavity, exhaling from the curve, drawing it towards the midline. Keep both sit bones reaching back, breathing into the concavity, exhaling from the curve. And then let's go ahead and walk our hands back to center. And then we'll go ahead and find our tabletop again. So hands coming back on in under you. Good, take a moment there. Okay, we're gonna bring one foot forward here next. So if you feel like you need longer arms to make this transition, blocks are always super helpful. So we're gonna bring our right foot forward, and you can have your blocks handy here if you need them. If you feel comfortable and have your balance, you're welcome to take your hands away from your blocks. So we're kind of stacked up right here. And then we're gonna tune in with our pelvis for a moment. So quite often when we have scoliosis, our pelvis shifts to one side. So you might find that happening here as well, particularly if you have a concavity in the lumbar spine on your right side. When the right leg is forward, you might find that hip wanting to kind of crunch up towards the shoulder and shift out towards the side. So see if you can lengthen the waist and draw the pelvis towards your midline. So we're stacking shoulders right above our hips. And then let's draw our arms up overhead again. Use the arms to reach up and lengthen the spine. Keep yourself stable through your feet. While pressing down through your foundation for stability, and then lengthening up through the arms to find some elongation. Good. And then let's go ahead and bring our hands down. You can let them land on your blocks for a moment if you want to. You can let them land on your thigh, or maybe they're just okay hanging out. We're gonna bring a little bit of movement in here, and I'm gonna show you this from a variety of directions. So we're gonna move in the direction that our knee is pointing. So it's gonna start as a straight forward and back shift. And then we're gonna walk our front foot off to the side, any amount, and keep shifting in that direction. So we're gonna keep taking little baby steps out and shifting that direction. And we're just doing this for a little hip mobility, okay? And then while we continue to move here, we're gonna think about what our upper body is doing. So if I turn sideways and keep moving, I'm gonna make sure that I'm not arching into a back bend or that I'm not rounding forward. So I'm gonna try to keep my upper body nice and stacked, shoulders over hips, and just move through the hips, through the legs. All right, if you're still off to the side, go ahead and start to walk your way forward here again. And then we're gonna swap our way around. Okay, so again, you can use hands to blocks if you need to for this transition. We're gonna take our right foot back. We'll bring our left foot forward, and then we pause again. So check in, notice the pelvis. So if you have a left lumbar concavity, you might find that the hips are shifting over, shifting up towards the shoulder. See if you can lengthen the waist. Keep the pelvis neutral. Stack the shoulders right above your hips. And then let's draw our arms up, root down through the feet. Find some length and elongation here through the upper body. And as always, settle in with your breath. And then go ahead and bring your hands down. We're gonna come back to that motion through our hips. A little hip mobility. So we're gonna shift in the direction the knee is pointing. And we're gonna keep checking in here with our upper body. So maybe even bring one hand to your belly, one hand to your low back, and just make sure you're not coming into a back bend or a forward rounded position through the spine. If this is too much for the knee, you're welcome to bring a blanket in under the knee for a softer surface. You can go out as far as it feels comfortable there and then make your way back. I'm just getting some motion in all directions in our hip here. And then once you found your way back to center, we're gonna go ahead and pause again. We're gonna find our way up to stand. So it might be easiest for you to get there from here. You might even use a block or two for support to come up if you need to. And lift that back knee, step your way forward, and come on up. All right, so once we come up to stand, we're gonna find our mountain pose. So go ahead and take a look down at your feet. Notice how your feet landed. Well, maybe you find one is a little more forward than the other. Maybe one's turned out to the side. Maybe one foot is collapsed down. And see if you can find sort of even square feet. So they're lined up, outside edges of your feet, pointing straight forward. Maybe lift and spread the toes. And then we're gonna work our way up our body here. So imagine that you could really push your feet down into the floor. Active, strong legs. Imagine drawing your kneecaps up towards your hips. So your quads are engaged. Squeeze your glutes. And then let your arms hang for a moment. So again, a lot of times with scoliosis, we have a hip shift. My hips like to live over here towards my right side. So I have to actively work to bring them back to center. And sometimes we need to make little baby steps with that. So if shifting from here to here is painful, just go a little bit each day. We'll get there. Okay, so we're gonna stack our hips right above our ankles. And then take your attention into your torso. Bring your own curve pattern into mind. We're gonna think about each of our curves moving towards the center of our body. So I just have one curve and it's on my left here in the center. If you have an S curve, you're gonna be thinking about two different curves drawing in towards the midline. Okay, we call that absorbing our lateral curve, pulling it in. And then we can think about derotating. So our curve side tends to come back in space. Can hold onto the pelvis and pull each of the curves forward. This is a little easier with just one curve, I think. So if you have an S curve, it's like wringing out a towel. Opposite directions, curves coming forward, okay? And then breathe the arms out to the sides and up. And then as you exhale, let your hands come on down. See if you can keep everything you've been working on continuing to happen. Breathe the arms up, strong feet, strong legs, hips squared. Exhale, hands down. Keeping all of that happening in the legs, and then curves drawn to the midline, curves derotated, drawing to the front of the body. Each time we bring our arms up, we can really think about lengthening, elongating through the spine. Good. Excellent. Let's do one more time here. Arms coming on up overhead. And then exhale, hands back down. Good. We're going to find our way into a warrior two pose. So we're going to step our feet nice and wide apart. That can mean something different for each of us, right? So whatever wide apart feels like to you. And then let's go ahead and start by turning our right foot out 90 degrees, or however much your hip will let it move. We're going to tuck our left toes in just a tad here, okay? And then take a look at your right knee. So if your hip doesn't like to roll open that far, that's okay. Go what feels comfortable for your hip, and then just line up the knee and the toes, all right? Okay, we've got our legs positioned. We're going to take our hands to our pelvis here. Notice where our frontal hip points are. Going to stack our shoulders so they're pointing the same direction. Stack our shoulders right above the pelvis. And then again, pause for a moment and think about each curve coming in towards your midline. And think about each curve, the prominence on your back, coming towards the front. So we're working to derotate our curve and draw it towards the midline. Okay? You're going to try to hold that and then bring your arms up to shoulder height. And you can turn your head to look out over the right fingers here on this side. And then we'll just hold and breathe here. Notice as you're holding if you tend to lose your posture corrections and just kind of slump back into whatever your normal scoliosis pattern is. And try to keep yourself long and tall. Let's have one more breath on this side. And then we'll go ahead and soften the arms down and we'll flip our feet to the other direction. So our right toes are going to turn in towards us just a tiny bit. And then left toes will turn out 90 degrees or however far your hip says is okay to move. And then we're going to bend our left knee. Take a look to make sure the knee's pointing the same direction as our toes. All right? Notice where your hips are pointing. Let your shoulders point the same direction. Hold your pelvis for a moment. Curves de-rotate. Curves draw towards the midline. Again, we all have a different curve pattern, so that looks a little different for every person. And then we draw our arms up. You can look out over the left fingers this time. And then settle in with your breath. Can we keep the legs strong? Can we keep our posture corrections consistent in our pose? So can we keep our curves drawn in and de-rotated? Can you keep the breath flowing? Let's have one more nice big breath here. And then go ahead and soften out. You can turn your feet towards the long side of your mat for a moment, and then go ahead and step your feet closer together. All right, we're gonna come into our triangle pose next. So I'm gonna use the wall for this. If you don't have a wall, you could use a chair instead. I'm going to start with my thoracic curve, or for me, it's a thoracolumbar curve facing the wall first. If you don't have a thoracolumbar or thoracic curve and you only have lumbar, just pick a side to start with. So I'm going to turn my foot that's at the wall out again, 90 degrees or however far my hip's going to let it happen. I'm going to step nice and wide here once again, and then I'm going to work for having 2 straight legs in this pose. I'm going to shift my hips. So hips are going to shift away from the wall or the chair if that's what you're using. My head's going to come towards the wall. And then come on back up. And we'll try that a few times. Really pay attention to whether or not this motion is only happening at the hips or if you're side bending through the waist. So keep your waist long, let the hips move. And then this next time we do that, we're going to pause there. We're going to take our arm closest to the wall up and find support. And if you're not using a wall, you can place your hand on the back of a chair instead. So we'll take it up, find support, and then we're going to draw our other arm out past our ear and think about lengthening through our concavities. Good, breathe. Find length, and then we'll gently find our way back out again. All right, we're gonna do the other side. So I'm gonna turn around so that I have my concave side facing the wall and facing you. So I'm gonna find that foot placement again here. Foot closest to the wall, turned out 90 degrees. Nice big wide step. And then I'll have both legs straight. Gonna shift my hips towards one side, let the head come towards the wall, and then come on back up. And we'll keep that going a few times and try to pay attention to whether or not this movement is coming from the hips or if it's coming through side bending. So when we do these movements that are hip related, whatever side our concavity is on, there's a higher likelihood for us to side bend that way. So my concavity is here. So it'd be really easy for me to turn this into a side bend. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep concavities long and open and move at the hips. And then when we shift, we'll pause. I'm going to take our hand to the wall, find that support. This time we're finding length and openness in the concavity. And then if you have a thoracic curve, it'll be on this side this time. We're going to take that arm down on this side. And think about our curve ribs kind of coming closer towards each other and in towards the midline. And then we'll go ahead and find our way back out. And step our feet back together again. All right, we're gonna find our way back down onto our knees from here. So however it's easiest for you to get there, you can do the reverse of what we did to come up if you want, stepping one foot forward, bending our knees, so we're back into that sort of half kneeling pose. And then we're gonna actually be kickstanding one leg out to the side. So we're gonna stay on one leg. Let's say our left leg's gonna stay under us. We're gonna kickstand the right leg out to the side. All right? And then we're gonna shift our upper body, similar to our triangle pose. We're gonna shift our upper body from our hips, not from our waist. Okay, and we're gonna think about getting nice and long here. And then settle in with your breath. Think about the rib cage expanding wide. And in particular, send your breath into your thoracic concavity. So breathe into the concavity, exhale from the curve. That might be a different side for you than it was for me. So hold and breathe. Find your strength, lengthen. And then let's come on up. All right, we're gonna swap our way around here to the other side. If your hips are feeling this, you're probably not alone. I warned you it was a very hip-focused practice. All right, we've got our left leg kickstanded out this time. We're gonna lean our upper body away from that straight leg. Check in with the sides of the waist. Keep them long. Make sure you're not compressing and side bending down into a concavity. Keep lengthening. And then settle in with your breath. Let the rib cage expand. Let it get wide. Good. Lengthen with each of your breaths. Keep the concavities long. Find your strength. And then let's gently find our way back up. Good. You can bring your knee back on in under you here. We're gonna come back down to our tabletop. So you can let your hands find their way back down. We're gonna find our shoulders under our wrists and our knees under our hips. And then we're gonna take the right leg back and lift it from the floor. And try to keep the hips and the pelvis steady there. And then come on back down. So toes are gonna land. Notice where your hips are, notice where the pelvis is. Lift your leg, make sure the pelvis did not roll open, and come on down. Let's do that one more time. I'm gonna hold, and this time if you're up for it, we're gonna let the opposite arm reach forward along the ear. And then come on back down. Let's try that one more time. Same side here. So legs gonna lift, arm's gonna lift. So if this arm that is reaching forward is connected to a thoracic curve, you're gonna think about drawing the curve towards the midline. So we're keeping the concavity open and not overexpressing our curve. And then come on down. We're gonna swap sides here. We'll take a leg back. Do a little lift and land, and then again, we'll just lift that same way. Pay attention to your pelvis this time. Keep the pelvis steady and land. And then we'll lift, and then if you're up for it, add that arm reach in. Take your attention to your thoracic. Where's your curve? Where's your concavity? If you have a curve on the reaching side, make sure you're not overarching into the curve. Keep concavities open. Good, and then come on down. Let's give that one more go. We'll lift the leg, lift our arm, lengthen, and come on down. All right, excellent. We're gonna find our way back to a rest position here. We're gonna wind our way down. So you can choose any rest position whatsoever, whatever feels happy and supportive. I'm gonna just bring my blocks under my knees. So again, as I find my way down, I'm gonna come through my side, roll onto the back. And then once I'm here, I'm gonna give myself a little knee support, but you can choose a different position. So you could come back into a reclined bound angle we started in if you'd like. You could let your legs rest straight out if you want to. Do your check-in, just like we did in the beginning. Where's your head? Do you need head support? Where under your body do you have a little space? What needs to be supported? So maybe bring your padding into concavities so it can feel that support and rest. Check in with the shoulders, check in with the low back. And then once you're well supported there, go ahead and let yourself land. And as we wind our practice down here today, we're going to go ahead and loosen our grip on our breath. We spend a good bit of time in scoliosis yoga breathing in specific ways. But it's also important just to let yourself fully rest. And that involves your mind and your body. So as we start to wind down here, just let your breath be however it wants to be. No right or wrong, no better or best. And then begin to loosen your grip on all the muscles of your body. Close your eyes or find a soft gaze. Release any tension from your forehead and your jaw. Allow the entire weight of your head to be supported. Use head support only if you need it. Soften the neck and the shoulders. Allow the arms to rest fully and completely. Soften all the muscles of your torso. Just allow the back to settle towards the support beneath you. Allow your chest and your belly to settle towards your back. Let go of any gripping. Let go of any tension. And then bring your attention to your pelvis and your glutes, your hips, and allow all of those muscles to soften as well. Your feet might roll open a little bit here. Pinky toes might roll towards the floor if the legs are stretched out like mine are when we soften and relax through the hips, and that's okay. Let it just be okay for now. Allow the legs to just land and settle. Let them be held by support. And then see if you can allow this same sense of softness and ease to settle into your mind. Just loosen your grip on your thoughts for a moment. Each time a thought arrives, let it leave just as easily as it came. And then we'll gently bring our attention back to the here and now, back to our breath. Let a little bit of wiggling come into fingers or toes. Maybe turn the head side to side. Maybe give yourself a nice big whole body stretch here, reaching the arms back again. And then when you're feeling ready, you can take your time. You can go ahead and allow the knees to bend, bring your feet to the ground. And we'll again roll to one side so that arm can come up overhead. Roll to the side, use your arms for support, and find your way up. Well, thank you for practicing with me here today. Namaste.